All right, so welcome back to panel 3. We've got Jim McCallum and Scott Bradley on this one. So we're going to talk about now from a bit more of a collector's point of view. So I'll introduce our panelists in case you don't already know them. Jim is the author of Irwin Toy, the Canadian Star Wars Story, right there, which was first released in 2000 and is still really the Bible and best book on the history of vintage Star Wars in Canada. And Jim had a pretty massive Star Wars collection, then sold it all in the 2000s, and then about 2 years ago, came back to vintage Star Wars. So we'll find out a little bit about that. And Scott is the owner or webmaster, shall we say, and of the Canadian Star Wars Gallery website, which I think for a lot of us is probably like the first place you hit up when you were like, what is the deal with these Canadian things, or what is this thing? And your site always shows up when you Google some weird Canadian stuff. So it's been a great
Just Google
resource.
Weird stuff.
Yeah, a great resource for everyone. And Scott, you've been basically collecting forever, I think, really, right?
I guess right from day one, when they first came out.
Yeah, amassed a pretty big collection. So these are probably two of the biggest Canadian collectors, although we've got some pretty big collections in the room as well, I think. But yeah, I wanted to start with just kind of learning about your collections and stuff, because I always find it interesting how everyone collects in a different way and does things different. So Jim, let's start with you. When did you first start collecting, or did it ever like stop? Or you just went from being a kid to buying more, or how did it first start for you?
Well, how it started for me was my first year at university. We were at Silver Snail here on Queen Street, and there was a Luke 20 back, and I was just amazed that you could find something from 10 years ago still on a card and on the package and whatever, and it was $100. And my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, she's like, it's $100, just go spend the money. And I'm like, oh my goodness, $100 for a Star Wars toy, this is crazy. But we went down to the bank machine and we ended up picking up, and that Luke 20 back, Canadian 20 back, was my first ever real vintage figure.
Mm-hmm. And did you, back in that day, were you focused on Canadian stuff or just getting stuff?
No, from there it just spiraled, because anything I do, nothing's half-assed. It's like I'm all in. It's, live, breathe the stuff 24 hours a day kind of thing. So I got all the information. There was no real internet. Yeah. There was a little bit. That's the reason my email address to this day is yak_face@istarted.ca, and because I was on the hunt for a yak face. That's what I knew that I wanted and whatever, and I didn't know this email thing's going to last. And 6 months ago, I was somewhere and she asked what my email address is, and I'm like, yakface@istarted.ca, and she's like, you're not that ugly. And so I've been saddled with this thing for 25 years on the search for the yak face, and yeah.
And Scott, you said you pretty much just from childhood kept on collecting things. So how did that work for you? Did you, as a kid, keep things in pristine condition and stuff like that?
Yeah, actually, when our family, when we were growing up, the mantra was, you only get one of anything. You have to look after it, or else if you break it, not like those kids, that set their things on fire or put firecrackers in it and things like that. That was not our family. If something broke, you had to fix it, because, we just didn't have the money to go out and buy multiple copies of the same thing. So, we really looked after our stuff. I was able to keep my childhood toys right into like adulthood. They got kind of put away when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Came back out when I graduated university. So, I was lucky I was able to keep everything.
And so you guys collected a lot during the kind of the early internet days, or the pre-internet days. Jim, do you want to talk a bit about, like, I think a lot of us newer collectors are so used to pretty much any production piece. If you have the money, you can go and buy it today. If you wanted, you can get it on eBay or Facebook. How were you acquiring things back in like the 90s and stuff like that?
In the 90s, there was the Mississauga Toy Show at the International Center was the big events.
Yeah.
There was a couple of other smaller shows. but that was the main show. So I was gearing up for like 4 shows, 6 shows a year kind of thing. That's where mostly everything came from.
Yeah.
And there was a place called V&L Gifts, Volker, who set up at the toy shows. He was responsible for buying a lot of overstock Irwin stuff. And I used to, the consumers distributing packs, he used to bring one out every show, and it was $250 for each of the 5 figures in the pack. And if you bought all 5 figures, he'd give them to you for $200. So I would take it, open it up, throw the box out, because I own a box company as well. So the last thing I want to see is corrugated floating around the house for any reason. So we just used to get rid of the consumers boxes and but they were gem mint, like, they would be AFA 90, 95, carded figures in there. So, and I would just buy doubles. Every time you bring one out, I just buy more and use them for trade bait and stuff like that.
Just whatever you could get your hands on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Scott, was Rebel Scum, when was kind of the heyday for that and for trading on Rebel Scum and stuff?
Yeah, actually, I went before those days. You may have been on Usenet. If anybody remembers Usenet here, the old rec.arts.sf.collecting.starwars.vintage. A lot of people have no idea what that is these days, but it's like a precursor. It's like a text-only format, I think. You couldn't post pictures, nothing like that. But for me, back then, it was more like just discussion. Unlike Toronto, we don't have too many. I'm from Ottawa, so we don't have too many toy shows to go to. So for me, a lot of the buying and selling I did was through, or mainly just buying was through the Crux publication, Toy Shop. Used to get that and used to flip through there. And in some dealers, some larger dealers in the States used to have photos of what they were selling. So if you look very, very closely, you could see, like multiple lines of language. You say, oh, that's a Canadian thing, and I don't have that. So you call them up and, do you have that TIE Fighter? Do you have that Death Star? And so we were able to get that. A lot of it I got actually was from the US when I initially started,
Oh, that's interesting. It's always interesting how the Canadian stuff ends up in the US and then we buy it back and try and bring it back up here. So Jim, let's talk about, you sold your collection eventually. What did your collection look like before you sold it?
I don't want to talk about it. I mean, I did sell it to try and, the book came out. I've been at it for 15 years and I wanted to, get into comic booking and whatever. So I have turned it into a shop where I just sell vintage, high-end books and stuff like that. So it all worked out, but I mean, in my heyday, so at the time I had the only Sears Canada sets, all 7 of them. There you go, right there. And that's like 1996. I was spending $8,000 US on that Han Bespin. But I mean, all of those, the first one I ever got was the Dengar. That was at a local show here in Toronto. And that was $500 when I bought it. And yeah, I used to have 2 or 3. There's a picture floating around the internet when I had 3 Veerses, and my son, who's 1 year old, he's got one in his hand. I've got one in my hand, and they weren't super tough, but yeah. So that was what I focused on. The Dengar was mind blowing to me, and at the time I knew Chris Gorjulius through the archive, and he's like, "Oh, I've got a couple of these too," and that's how I started getting more involved with the archive and with the other guys in the U.S. Is once I picked up that Dengar, I had something special that wasn't on the archive, so that's how I sort of got in with that American crowd, the inner circle.
Nice. How did you guys even know, like with Canada, there's so many special packs and different things like that in kind of pre-internet days or pre-your book days, like how did you even figure out what was out there?
It was just a guessing game. Like a lot of stuff would just show up and you're like, wow, I've never seen that before. That's kind of cool. And the problem with me though is I quite the condition, snob. So if that 7-pack had a rip in it, I would have passed it up, even if it was $50. It had to be really, really good condition and what have you. So getting back to your earlier question of what kind of stuff I had was, that was one of my 7-packs, one of 3 that I had at the time. And there's that famous Imperial Forces Canadian 3-pack that people have seen that's in exceptional condition. That came from Mark Schmidt. That was like $3,000 back in the day, and now I know it's for sale for $25,000 US, and someone in Great Britain has it available for sale now. So so it was just just finding stuff. Yeah, that's the one right there. That thing is so. I've only seen three packs in my life, collecting, and that one was definitely the nicest. I passed on the other two that were Canadian 3-packs, but that one I couldn't pass on, and that's fantastic shape, and that's also the hardest American one to get as well. So the fact to see that on a Canadian card, it was kind of mind blowing.
And you're into 3-packs as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Do you have how many? What do you have as far as 3-packs?
Or
maybe what don't you have?
Yeah. No. So for these original, the US type, I've got 5 of them. Oh, wow. I think so. So that includes like the Star Wars ones. I've got 2 of the. I've got this one, but it's the one that's in lesser shape. The one that's a bit torn a little bit. Unlike Jim, I will take stuff that's in lesser condition.
Yeah, we'll take Jim's sloppy seconds. And I should say that Jim says he just kind of got into comic books, but into a fairly big way. Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's done well for me for sure. Yeah, for sure, it's done well. But when you see them selling for $50,000, like the 3-pack with the 3 carded figures in it, and I, sold mine to Scott McDonald for like $6,000 or whatever. But the house is paid for. It's on the lake now. It's all relative. And I did get robbed 3 years ago. My comic shop got robbed. I got robbed on a Monday, and then they robbed my comic shop on a Friday. So even if I had all this stuff, it'd probably all be gone anyways. They just targeted my comics and a couple of Star Wars things I had left. So it would have all been gone anyways. So might as well have sold it at the right time.
And what got you back into Star Wars? What?
December 4th, 2021, watching Mandalorian. Boba Fett shows up, and that Friday I watched it on a Friday. It was December 4th. I remember it vividly. And as soon as I saw Boba Fett, I'm like, this gene that I had put inside of me and recessed, all of a sudden it just came out. The next day was my birthday. That's how I remember. So the next morning I wake up, I go to Toys R Us, I go to all the comic stores. I'm like, find something, and didn't find anything that I wanted. But then that's what brought me back into is just that one episode of Boba Fett showing up in Mandalorian, and then I was back in.
That's cool. All right. Well, let's talk about some Canadian exclusives and stuff here, and it's great to have you guys here who are experts on this.
Can I just cut you off for 1 second? So I know everyone thinks that this is rare. This, back in the day in the 90s, every toy dealer at every show you ever went to had a 21 back Boba Fett. Whether they sold tin toys and they were 70 years old, they all had them. So I know like Joe Fiore's still looking for one, and he's like, these things are tough. And I'm like, no, back in the day, they were not tough at all.
And where did they all go?
I don't know where they all are now, but it's not a tough figure, actually.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about some of the Canadian exclusives. The Star Wars 12-back and 20-back set boxes. Those are pretty rare, right? I don't know.
Those are super rare. I've never seen one in person. Mm-hmm. I've never come across them. They were never at any shows in the 90s or the 2000s.
So these were like a box with actually carded figures inside them, right? And so a full first 12 run and then a full first 20 back. And so there was one of those kind of popped up 3 or 4 years ago. Do you remember seeing that? And that was... Yeah, I think, or in Quebec or something, and some guy just randomly found one at a flea market, I think, or something. Yeah. No, that's one I've never seen live in person. Let's talk about some of the Sears stuff then. The Sears, let's start with the 3-packs, let's say. And so, Jim, you talked, I think, about having some of the 3-packs, right?
Yes.
So tell us about when were they put out and...
They're like 1980, 81-ish. Scott and I see differently on this subject than we have for 25 years. So
Controversy.
Scott and I have always, this is the first time we've ever met, is yesterday. We've always had a mutual respect, but we have always on Rebel Scum felt free to give it to each other. And
Healthy discussion.
Exactly.
Well,
and there's a
feel free to do
few different topics that we disagree on, I think. So that's what the ring the bell is, because someone's expecting a showdown here for entertainment purposes. So yeah, that's one of this year's 3-packs. Scott, you might as well talk about it because you believe there's only a couple different combinations.
So from my opinion, and what I've seen over the years, what Sears or what I guess Irwin normally did when they offered these to the different stores, they usually packaged them with a figure that was either one or two that was brand new for the year that was released in, coupled with one or two that was older to help out, like move out the old stock or something like that. Or the odd time they'd have like a themed set that would go, like say with Dagobah, there was like a 4-pack that had Darth Vader, Ben, Yoda, and Luke Bespin. Yeah. That if you bought the Yoda set at Sears, you were able to get this 4-pack for X amount of dollars, like discounted. So, but what we've seen like in the past is that the boxes normally come up, and since the Canadian figures are so hard to find, you'll see a lot of people trying to add contents to them, and then just to say this is like a rare, never seen before, version. Whereas the ones that you've seen in the catalogs that do have those components of mix of old for the year that they were offered and a new for the year that they were offered in, they actually specifically say what the contents are. Yeah. The catalogs show the pictures. The flyers always show the pictures of just the two of these particular 1982 sets. Mm-hmm. So that's basically my stance on it.
So these wouldn't have been just mail order, right? They would have been available at the store as well in these boxes? Or?
They should have been at retail. I mean, they've gone through all that trouble of making the pretty packaging. You want to show it off more so than anything.
The thing with Sears, though, is that they used to drive activity towards the Wish book at Christmas time, and then in the stores, but with different special offers or special sets. So some you can only get in store, others you can only get through the catalog. But when I found the catalog ones were when Christmas came and the rush was on, and there was the large demand for it, you'd see some starting to creep out onto the floors, like the 78 or the 79. 12 and 20 boxes. Yeah. Some of them have been found with price tags on them, yet they were like in the catalog only, shown as like catalog exclusives, but they did creep out onto the floors in some areas of the country at Sears.
And what do you think one of these would go for nowadays?
Well, I just saw the preview for the Hakes auction and for this week, for this auction coming up, and it said with some of the past prices realized, and one of the 3 packs was on, and I think it was $56,000 for a graded 75 or 80. That's I know David DeMarcus was eyeing whether he won it or not. I don't know, but there's a big American guy that's spending real money on Canadian stuff.
All right. So there's also the 7 packs as well, and these pretty iconic box there that I think has been kind of redone in modern times, right? For Hasbro has done a pack out like this. Scott, do you want to talk about, were they doing the same thing, you think, where they were trying to introduce a new figure or two?
Yeah.
Like this is a bit of a strange sampling of figures there, I guess you got Luke on Bespin, just not in his Bespin outfit, but yeah, what was up with the 7 packs?
Yeah, well, the 7 packs, they all came out in 1980. So if you notice, there is the figure, and it should be a skin wrap figure with the Lobot at the end there. That one is, I think that the actual bubbled figure with the picture came on later in 1981. But when these sets were being sold in 1980, Sears had issued these there's 7 packs, I think it were. And if you look at it, the contents altogether, if you bought all 5 of those sets, you could get all of the figures that were available at retail at the time, plus the 4 skin wrap figures, which were released in the US in the Cloud City play set. We didn't get the Cloud City play set in 1980. We did get it the following year, 1981, but Irwin had made use of the actual figures in these particular sets. So another great idea to help move out old stock. If you wanted to get that one brand new figure, you had to buy these 6 other figures in the box. But just like a personal recollection, when these first came out in the stores, that large window there, it's open. And a lot of people, if you wanted, or if, like, say, a mother was looking to buy her child a specific figure and one wasn't hanging on the pegs. I don't know if this happened down here either, or in other parts of the country, but in Ottawa, I found that people would put their hand in and just rip out the figure that they wanted. So a lot of the sets that were lying loose on the shelves, some of them were incomplete a lot of the times, So the odd time you'll still see today some of the figures when you see the little rips that come down from top to bottom. Since these figures were put in and they're held in with an adhesive, they're all stuck together. Chances are they're from one of these old multi-packs that were sold at Sears.
Weren't some of them stapled though too?
Yeah, they were stapled as well.
Yeah, so a lot of the Canadian cards that you see with the 2 staple holes in it, that means it probably originated from a 7-pack.
Whereabouts were they stapled on the card?
It would be up top here, right up here where you couldn't see the staple. And so this one would be stapled to that one, this one would be stapled to that one. So if you took it out of the box, it would be in it would be stuck together.
Yeah, it'd be a big long thing.
Yes.
Cool. All right, well, let's talk about the skin wrap figures. And we've got, this is one of Chris's Lobot ones here. And so these are, it's funny because they're quite desired, yet they're probably the ugliest Star Wars product, ever released. So do you want to talk a bit more? Let's go to Jim about why they did this in this way.
Or
what your theory might be.
I think my theory differs a little bit, but like Scott said, this is obviously the Rebel Command Center playsets in the U.S. and a Cloud City playset, which we didn't get here as an absolute equivalent. So I don't think those were strong selling sets in the States either, the Rebel Command Center or the Cloud City playset. So just an overstock of figures and sent down here to have the exclusive rights, and we just put on generic packaging. That for why on the generic packaging, I'm not sure. But this is the closest to a baggy figure that we would have in Canada.
Yeah. Since they were supposed to be put in sets too, since there was no real picture card for any of these figures yet.
Most of it
wasn't available, right? Yeah. So Irwin had to create their own card that was the same size as the picture cards for the other ones so that they would fit in and stay in. So obviously, if you put a baggy figure in the box, it'd just fall right out, or it wouldn't be held in place where the consumer could see it. So so the generic blank card was born for the multi-pack sets.
Yeah, and I'm assuming everyone knows, but that is not an AT-AT commander. That's General Veers. It's actually labeled as General Veers, which is pretty cool. And then the R2 is a R2 periscope and not R2 sensor scope. And
actually, that brings up a good point. For years, and I don't know if anybody's seen this in the Sears 1980 catalog, the Ugnaught was called Tusk from Ugnaught. And nobody for years ever knew where did this name come from. Was the Ugnaught name Tusk? Nobody heard in the movie. It wasn't in the novel. It wasn't anywhere until I think Jim was talking about the Engineering and Empire book that Gary Borbidge and a few other people had come up with. In that book, there is a photo from Kenner when they were designing the different figures, and they had some handwritten notes on it, and it actually said Tusk, pointing to the one that they were actually going to make. And it said, these are Ugnaughts. So I guess that we had the information from Kenner in the States saying that the figure's name is Tusk and the planet he's from is Ugnaught. But by the time we went to make the actual card, it only said Ugnaught. So we had that clarification already from Kenner in the US that no, this is just, it's not his name. But when Sears had the text description, that's what it was. It was Tusk from Ugnaught. So I've always found that kind of interesting. It baffled me for years. How did they get this name? Where did Sears get this from? Until Gary's photo came up in that book. I said, it just makes all the sense now. I can understand where it came from.
Yeah, and going back to the other 7-pack figure, so that Lobot would have been in that 7-pack, but I kept it like that. I just put another Lobot in there because I wanted my Sears Canada set to be, uniform and whatever, instead of having one in the box and it looked incomplete. So that's the only reason why that Lobot was in there, is just as a placeholder kind of thing for that picture.
Yeah, and it was talking about how like the window and those boxes were all open after the snatch and grab fiasco of 1980 in Ottawa, Ontario. Well, it wasn't just because of that, obviously, but they all the other packs had little plastic windows sealed in, so it prevented people from, like, I guess you could pick your car keys in there or something like that and scratch through and open it. But it dissuaded buyers from then on after.
And then when Return of the Jedi rolled around, was there multi-packs for Return at all?
None that I can think of.
No, eh?
The only thing that Sears had were little white mailer boxes, and those were baggies, just bag figures inside.
Like
those
random figures, not the mail.
No, they had in the 83 and 84 catalogs. I think there's there's 2 figures and there's 4 sets. So like a Rancor Keeper and a Tebow, or a Weequay and a Rebel Commando or something like that. But they were all just bagged, and they came in little white mailer boxes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So one of the other differences between Canada and the States is when figures were packed in to play sets or vehicles. So first off, in the US, that's almost always baggied figures, where in Canada, it's almost always carded figures. And, I think we have the understanding that that's very much around trying to move old stock and turn it into something special for a particular retailer. Scott, do you maybe want to discuss some of the play sets and stuff that had figures packed in, and some of the weird combinations?
Yeah, the like special offer sets, or we had a real plethora of special offer sets in Canada, and Irwin always made a point of combining a figure that went right with the set itself. So there's a lot of thought that went into it. Like the Millennium Falcon, I think for 3 years you could get like a Han and a Chewbacca inside it if you ordered. And again, a lot of these came through Sears. One weird one was in I think it was 1980 when they packaged a Yoda with the Cantina. Yeah. Conceptually, Yoda's a little creature and he fit right in with the Cantina. Made sense and all that. Yeah. And the Dagobah playset wasn't available until the following year in 81 anyway, so there's nothing really for him to go with. Yeah. But there was a whole lot of different special offer sets, way more than the US actually. We got a lot more up here. We were kind of spoiled that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Cantina also had that black and white picture.
Yeah,
too.
The picture too.
Right. And there's some different. Like the stickers are kind of different from the US as well when they're pack-ins, like
for sure,
Land Speeder and stuff like that.
Yeah, and in the States they didn't have a special offer Millennium Falcon, so the only special offer Falcon is a Canada version.
All right, let's rewind a bit and let's talk about GDE pyramid logos. And this is, again, something that's controversial and that, none of us really knows the exact answer to this. Jim, give us kind of the background on pyramids, what the Star Wars backs, there's A, B, and C, right? And the GDE pyramids are the C's.
Right.
So yeah, what's your thinking and the current knowledge of?
I like the thought that that's the first run. Okay, I like the. I mean,
so you think it's really technically the A?
George sort of alluded something to it that I'm sure he'll get into his presentation. But I like the thought of it being first run. To not be on there, then for them to all of a sudden put them on there and then take them off again, it doesn't make sense to me. This sort of makes sense to me that they're the first. I've always despised the card back because I hate the French on the front. I mean, I left so many of those on the, I'm choosing what we call an A or a B after that thing. Same thing as transitions. I despise transitions because Return of the Jedi is my least favorite logo. And then for them to cover up that beautiful Empire logo, I was never, ever happy about. But now that I'm back, I'm like, oh, those things are cool, because though I didn't focus on them my first go around, so now I'd like them. But But yeah, that Jedi sticker just bothers me. It really, really did at the time. So I think of it. I don't know for a fact. I just, like George said yesterday at dinner or when we were in here, I know he has a theory on it too. So hopefully he'll tell us later.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the pyramid cards, or like?
I do.
Yeah.
So-
All right.
Okay, going back February 1978. So being from Ottawa, we were actually down here in Toronto, and I got my first figure at the Eaton Center. And back then, they were only shipping the 4. So I had the early bird certificate in the States and all that, and I was looking for that all over the place here in Canada, because you see it on Saturday morning cartoons, right? And you see it and think, oh wow, God, like they're coming out with Star Wars toys, eh? So, but not thinking that I'm watching an American channel. It was either like NBC, ABC, or CBS, eh, for like Saturday morning cartoons. I'm watching Scooby-Doo and Bugs Bunny, and then, but I'm out in the stores as a little kid looking for I want to be the first one in there. I want to get those 4 figures, eh? And looking for it. Never came. Christmas came and went, and still I said, was TV lying to me? And like, I can't find this thing anywhere. And then boom, we came down. My dad came on a business trip. So this is a bit of a long-winded story. Came down on a business trip, and what he normally did was he took me out of school, and my mom came down as well, and we kind of went shopping when he went for his meetings during the day. And so we were at Eaton Center and walked in. The first 4 were there, and they were the English only ones. So my theory is that so the first 4 came out in around February, March. The next 5 came out about April, May, and then the last 3 of the 12 came out around May, June. So like the Final Cave Jawa and the Sand People and the Death Squad Commander. But with our bilingualism laws in Canada, if you look at that card, we got all of our design templates from the States, and it was English only on front back. So other than the descriptions of the characters, so the movie logo, Star Wars, was English on the front, was English on the back, whereas this helped correct that. And you had the English and the French to, appease or abide by the bilingualism law in Canada. But you'll notice that these ones with the pyramid logo, you don't see many of them at all. No. Those first ones that were like the English only, the A's and the B's, they were available like early in the year, and they went like right through, and they were sold still like simultaneously throughout 1978, along with these, because there was so much stock that stores had bought. And then these ones with the pyramid logo, like they came out like say late summer, I think, early fall, and they weren't around too long, because the following year in February, March, that's when the Boba Fett offer came out. So the 12s were all gone and the 20s were in, and the Boba Fett offer came out a little bit later after that. So it's one reason why you don't really see these ones around too much, and they're really tough to find.
So you think it was later, and they just, for language laws reasons, slapped it on there, and then went on to Empire after that.
Yeah,
20 backs.
20 backs with the Fett offers, and then Empire was then the 21 backs came.
Yeah,
and then the Fett or the Empire Strikes Back was 80.
Alrighty, well, we'll be discussing this further in the next panel. Let's talk about transition stickers now, since you brought them up, and. I always find transition stickers are kind of an interesting one when you're a new collector, because I remember when I first started back collecting, not knowing a lot about Canadian stuff, and you kind of almost miss that it's a sticker sometimes. Like this one's a little janky, but there's on some figures where like they place it pretty good, and you kind of almost miss the fact if you don't know the differences in the logos and stuff. But Jim, do you want to give us some background on the transition stickers and why we all believe that they exist and stuff?
Well, they were just trying to, update the line. Obviously it was a toy that was, early 1983 that was still on the shelves, and to, promote the new upcoming movie and whatever, and make it more update. The easiest and cheapest way would be to throw a sticker on it. And there's 3 stickers. So there's the Jedi logo, then the Return of the Jedi offer there, and then there's a third one on the back for Akbar, right?
Yeah,
exactly. And that one that's at the bottom, that would have covered up, like, because they could be 41 backs, they could be 47 backs, so they would cover up the survival kit offer. They would cut up, the whatever the 47 was for the forlom, right? So that's what that purpose of that sticker was.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that these come in so many different card backs that, everything else a lot of times is very uniform. But with these, it's just whatever they had, I guess, right, to put stickers on.
It's interesting with these because the previous year in '82, there was a whole bunch of mail-in offers, like the display arena, you had 4LOM, and they were all like in succession. But in Canada, it took a little longer to get up and going with these things. So while in the States, the offers were ending, ours were just kind of beginning, and ours were kind of starting to get backed up with the new movie coming out the following year. We never had a 48 back in Canada. It went from like straight 47s and the Empire line right to the 65s and Return of the Jedi line. And of course, there was no, I think the 48s were the ones for Akbar in the States. Yeah. So of course we needed something to have our offer on, right? So anything that was available, and they took advantage of it by putting the stickers on, so that the offer was available to Canadian kids and not miss out on it. And then meet it in time before the movie came out, because this was kind of a sneak peek at.
So these came out before Return actually hit theaters. They were kind of teasing the movie with it.
These came out in like early '83, so just before Return of the Jedi, and then the Nien Nunb offer came out in May.
And Jim, where do you think they put the stickers on these?
I think they put them on at the factory, but I think some also went on at the store. I honestly do. Narayan has that Yoda. Narayan is a very famous Focus collector in Atlanta, Georgia, and he has a Zeller's Yoda transition where half of the price sticker is covered by the transition sticker. Yeah. So unless Zellers was sending the stuff back to Irwin it just seems like a lot of money to send something back to go get stickered when a sales rep or something could do a few if need be. That's my thinking. Again, covering up a price sticker, right? So whether right or wrong, I know Scott's going to disagree with me for sure.
What's your theory,
and we
Scott?
haven't got to Yak Face yet.
Well, it very could be, very well be. I've always heard that they were just put on using a label machine at the factory.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The thing with these ones, again, in recent years, there's been a bit of an increase in interest in these types of things. There are, just a warning, there are a lot of these homemade ones that are out there. A lot of people take used card backs and will peel the stickers off and slap them on different cards and say, oh, look, there's one that's never been seen before. Well, surprise, surprise, it's probably because it was never made originally, So, and some of these can sell for, over like thousands of dollars too, depending on the character.
Yeah. I mean, I've even picked up childhood collections where the kid has swapped the transition stickers to different card backs, and you get really excited at first that you're like, oh my God, this has never been seen. And then you're like, oh yeah, no, it's not real. Yeah. Has there, has any stickers ever shown up, like factory stickers, like the way that the Boba Fett or the free coin offer, in the US, you saw rolls of stickers at one point. Now you see singles, but have we ever seen someone selling transition stickers?
Like on a roll?
Yeah, like unused ones.
I have never. No, not at all.
Right. Well, maybe we'll find out that George Irwin has 10 packs in his basement.
In my trunk.
Yeah, in the trunk of the car. Yeah. All right, I guess the last of the controversial topics to talk about is Yak Face. And so to just give a bit of background, Yak Face is the only Power of the Force figure that appears on a Canadian card back. And for the most part, Power of the Force were not really released very much at retail in Canada at all. I know some stores did carry them. I don't know whether those were overstocked from the States that came up, probably. But basically, Irwin or Kenner Canada really didn't go forward with this line, yet the most famous and rare figure is on a Canadian card. I know, myself as someone who buys collections in Canada, I've never found a Yak Face in Canada or a card back. Yet in Australia, they're, at least 20 years ago, they seemed like they were swimming in them. And they had just tons and tons of them. So Scott, let's start with you. What do you think? What do you think? What's up with yak face?
I'm in the vast minority on this one. So when I was a kid, I got them at Toys R Us, or Toys City, sorry, that was owned by Consumers Distributing.
Yeah.
So people think I'm nuts, and they ask me, okay, well, like I've never seen it. And when you think about it, there's a lot of things kind of coming down the pipe back in '85 when this thing was released. Virtually none of the retailers ever bought any of the Power Force stuff. So I don't think there was that demand for it. So in Canada, Irwin didn't elect to make the bilingualized version of the Power of the Force line. Mm-hmm. There was enough demand though that and this has happened like throughout the years too, where in order to fill smaller orders, Irwin would get stock from the States on the American cards and bring them up. You see some American cards up here that have like Zellers on them, like price stickers and things like that. And Toy City was one place that did sell the line, not only like yak face, but
so they had more figures,
yeah, as well as like the skiff, the battle wagon, some of the droids line, the side gunner, and things like that, but all in American packaging, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, like our generation, we were teenagers by then too, right? So people weren't really buying it anymore, and even just the mere statement of like the Power of the Force line in Canada, like nobody remembers it at all. Mm-hmm. I don't know if anybody was really looking for back then. I still was buying them, but I wasn't playing with them. Obviously, I was kind of sticking them on the shelf, and that was about it. But Consumers or Toy City was one place. It was national chain at that time. And also, we didn't have these in Ottawa, but Toys R Us around that time started coming into Ontario.
Yeah.
And it was in Hamilton. I don't know if there must have been like Scarborough, some other places. And they had an ad in the Toronto Star that had Power of the Force as well. And it pictured, I think, Lando, General, Luke, and the battle poncho as well.
Yeah.
But because of the low demand for it, I don't think too many retailers other than like Toy State bought them. Mm-hmm. So the majority remained unsold. So they got, bought up by Toll Toys in Australia. They got the majority of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And what are your thoughts?
Oh, I would agree with that.
Yeah,
I mean, there's always stragglers and things that slip through the cracks. Hence the reason we see, a bunch of American carded figures at the end of the line that have Canadian Tire stickers and local stickers and whatever, right? Yeah. I mean, it was just a dumping ground. The line was dead here. It was dead pretty much everywhere in the world, in the US and whatever. But Australia, they couldn't get enough of it in 1985. Like it was hotter than. It was really, really hot. They were still having like mail away offers and stuff in 84 and 85 because it was demand, right? And then the Anakin shows up in the Power of the Force. Anakin shows up there, and the Gamorrean Guard and Nikto all show up in the Power of the Force packaging only in Australia, right? So because there was demand for these things, and they just,
And one thing to add too was a story I heard as well was that Yak Face was supposed to be a mail-in offer for the second series of Power Force figures in the States. And that mail-in offer never happened, and they weren't going to be using it. So they offered it to us in Canada, and we took it, made this. Sales were low, and the majority got bought up by Australia. So it kind of hopped around the continent and it went to the other side of the world for the remainder. And then, of course, in Europe, Tri-Logo cards, they had a whack of them as well over there.
Cool. We're getting low on time here. I wanted to ask you, I've learned a lot from you guys as collectors as well as other more seasoned collectors, more seasoned than myself, not more seasoned than you. But just wanted to see if each of you has any advice for someone who is, not necessarily a newbie collector, but is a few years into things. And I guess what advice you would give that you found has made it fun for you or interesting for you, not just like, hey, go after this particular thing or whatever, but if you had any advice for new collectors. And Scott?
Wow. There's lots. I guess maybe if I could be concise, it's do your homework, ask lots of questions. There's a lot of us that are out there, not only in Canada, but in the States. So basically any topic that you need information on, it'll likely be out there. The biggest mistake I see younger or newer collectors making is they'll try to buy something quick because they think it's rare or desirable, and then ask the question later. And then, unfortunately, you got to tell them, that's like a homemade, or it's been fixed, or it's been colored in, or, and then they lose all that money and, experience a lot of grief. But yeah, it's know your stuff, ask a lot of questions. Especially a lot of the old time collectors and newer ones as well, they're here to help as well. So everybody's very, very open, I find, in this community for years, for sharing information. And if you need to, sometimes, I need to see the bottom of the left foot. Could you please show me that? Because I'm looking for a particular mark, and sometimes I don't know what they're looking for, but okay, no, I'll go and do it. And there it is, and that'll actually be key in helping them decide. So, if you need that type of information there, just, lots of questions, and don't rush to, buy that seemingly rare item. It may not be. You might be getting yourself into some trouble.
Yeah, I've been there. Jim, you have the perspective of restarting up and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so what would be your advice?
What I tell everyone in Star Wars or comic booking or whatever, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Yeah. I mean, there's just take your time, enjoy it. There's no point putting together a collection in 6 months and have a whole collection, because after that, where do you go from there? So always just, take your time, find exactly what it is you want. Don't go all out and buy, just whatever's available at the time, because then you'll have a collection. You'll be like, why did I buy, 3/4 of this stuff, right? Just take your time, and eventually it'll all work out for you, and you'll find something where you were never expecting it. And that's always a sweeter thing. I mean, everyone could go buy something if they had $100,000 in their pocket, they buy whatever they want, right?
Yeah.
But it's much sweeter to get it for $500 in a place where you were never thinking that you'd ever find it, right? So that would be my advice.
Yeah, patience is key.
I mean, half the joy sometimes is getting the deal on something, or, like being patient and finding something that is out of your budget, but you can get it within your budget because you've been patient and stuff.
Yeah. Especially with the Canadian stuff. You won't get that very quickly for most items.
Yeah, definitely have to have patience.
Because, for being a collector is ridiculous as it is, right? I mean, you're all focused in, you got this thing, you got it in your hand, you're like, okay, now what can I go buy? What can I buy next, right? And I mean, you never look at it again for a couple of years, so.
Yeah, very true. So Jim has graciously printed a third edition of his book. I mean, this book is always hard to find, and, goes for good coin on eBay and stuff like that. So Jim's going to be selling his book at the original price from the year 2000. Yeah, $2,000.
It was $26.95, so we're going to round up to 27.
We'll round up to 27. Didn't bring any nickels.
Right. And then we did a special on the inside page. I did a special May the 4th logo on the inside, if you can see it. So that differs it from the other ones. So if you want to say you were there and you got the t-shirt and the book, that's the way to do it.
And it's a great, really comprehensive book, going down onto all the detail.
Other printings. This is at least a 1/4 inch thicker than the other ones he put on the glossiest paper. So this is the definitive printing, I would say, of this thing I did in a weekend 25 years ago.
Well, what made you write a book?
Oh, my ego. I was set up at a show in Mississauga and just selling loose figures. And a guy came looking around. He goes, "Oh, you're a Star Wars guy?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, I own a publishing company and I'm writing a book on Star Wars toys." And I said, "Really? So am I." I wasn't. And he's like, "Oh, really?" He goes, "Send me a sample chapter tomorrow." It was a Sunday. Send me a sample chapter of it on Monday, and I'll take a look at it. And if it's any good, then we'll go ahead and do the book. So left that show, drove straight home, wrote up a sample chapter, submitted it the next day, and somehow this thing got published. So that's how that worked out, just lying through my teeth.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Are there any questions for these two dudes? Anyone? Go ahead.
How much does grading affect your collecting? Is it as important to you? Do you maybe occasionally get a piece and be like, this should be preserved? How much of a
I like grading personally. I understand the problems with some of it. I think it works better on a mint in box toy than it does on a carded figure, because a carded figure will degrade in the yellow bubble. You start shipping the stuff and things are flying through the bubble and stuff like that. So the grade is no longer null and void, right? So. But I prefer it. I would prefer to buy my stuff because I am a little bit of a condition snob. I do prefer graded stuff. Know what you're getting. Make sure you're not getting restored something where someone's color touched it or a reseal or whatever. But to each their own. To each their own.
Yeah. Me, I'm the opposite. I'm not a grader at all. As a matter of fact, if I do get something that's great, I'll usually break it out of the case. I'd rather look at the contents and things like that. Well, not the figures, but the
is rip open those bubbles, right?
The like the play sets and the vehicles and things like that. And in a lot of times, it can actually help you if it's not graded, because like Jim was saying with the reproduction and things like that. Sometimes you need to feel the textures, sometimes to see if something's been glued together. Even, and this sounds kind of odd, but there's like a smell test where you can see if some glue or adhesive have been used, and you can smell it, and man, that's not 25 years or 40 years old. So I actually like to look at the contents and have them in my hands and kind of see them in person. The only thing that I could see grading really helping is if it's actually authenticated. So I like the authentication part of it. Somebody just assigning a grade, well, in my opinion, that's just somebody's opinion. I could disagree with it. If they add the authentication aspect to it, then that's really beneficial, because you're getting another person's point of view to see whether they agree or not, which is nice, like for vinyl Cape Jawas and all these other types of things. But some, like, the graders aren't perfect, like we're humans, so nobody's perfect when they grade this stuff. There have been a lot of problems over the years where something's been graded and people automatically think that it's been authenticated, and you look at it and say, hey, that shouldn't be in there. That's not right for that year. And then there's the company has the back and forth. Well, no, we weren't asked to authenticate it. We were just asked to grade it, So there's that bit of a controversy as well, that discussion.
Yeah, I think, I'm the same. I have a few things that are graded and most stuff that isn't. And it kind of depends on the item for me. But Robert?
Vacuum form packs, when they came into Canada, were they in baggies and then they put them in those forms, or were they loose just because they were overstock of intended for those play sets?
Well, so if you look at them and the years that they were released, the Han, Luke, or the Han, Ugnaught, Lobot, and Dengar, it was the same year as the States, that had the Cloud City play set. The following year in 81, when we had the 4-packs with General Veers, Luke, and R2-D2, that was the same year in the States that they had the Rebel Command Center. So we didn't go with the play sets, we took the figures. And they would have come here in baggies and like big boxes. And the process that they made for these things, the cards were like on a really big sheet. And the card stock is different than the regular retail cards. It's a bit tacky, because there's a sheet of plastic that actually gets heat sealed to it, and it forms a really tight grip. And then once that's done, they bring it over to a cutter, and the cutter would cut all of the cards in one shot, and then they would just take them and amass them, and then start putting them into the big 7-pack, multi-pack boxes, the 4s.
Scott, is it true that was done at O-Pee-Chee? I heard a story that's why it's on that card stock, is because the hockey card company is the people who did this particular packaging.
The printers were Lawson that did the printers, the cards for O-Pee-Chee, and the early packaging for the Star Wars, the Kenner line. If you look in the flaps on the X-Wing, and I think in the TIE Fighter, it says Lawson on there. But O-Pee-Chee just used the same printer. O-Pee-Chee didn't cut them themselves. They sent them to Lawson. But the skin wrap ones, they were cut, I think, at the factory at Irwin.
Okay.
So we do think that they came up in baggies and then they opened up the baggies and put them down on the cards to do this.
Yep. So there's like the same adhesive, actually, for the ones that are that are stuck together with adhesive. Actually, you can see it. It was like the adhesive's like on a roller, and you can see the adhesive through there.
Yeah. Okay.
What they would do is they would take the adhesive and they would roll it where all of the figures are supposed to be placed. Dengar, you'll see, usually has like an X on it because he's a little bit he's a bit heavier.
He's a stocky
and
guy.
he's got the backpack on him, so he's kind of twisted a little bit. So they had to put a couple of swats of adhesive on there just to keep them in place. Then when they put the card on the sealer, the plastic would come down, and then they would that adhesive would keep them in place until the plastic came down on them, and he'd seal them together before they went to the cutter.
That's really, I didn't know that they cut them en masse like that
Yeah.
all together. That's really interesting. Yeah.
And if we're going to get into the real minutia of these things too,
That's what we're here for.
There's two different variations. So one of them has like little pinprick holes.
Yeah.
And then there's a type that's a little bit wider and more a horizontal line.
Yeah.
So if you see one that doesn't look like the one you have, it doesn't mean it's fake or a custom or a replica or whatever kind of thing. There is two definitely variations in the card back.
They're different years.
And then, is that what it is? That's
Yeah,
just the different
yeah,
years.
yeah.
So the way they did it. Okay. So it's not like Dengar would have two separate different things. It either is
Yeah, it should
pinholes
be all
or
the same.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
it should be.
Yeah.
All of the skin wrap ones come with a sticker on the back of them. There was a half sticker.
No.
No.
Just some, and this is the weird thing. None of them actually did. I think that was done later on, and I wanted to ask you about that, Scott. Like, you do see those with like a Wolco sticker, and these were definitely Sears Canada exclusives. So how did they get to Wolco and were sold individually?
Yeah, so these were like exclusive to Sears in the year that they came out. So later on, when they were no longer exclusive and you could get these on picture cards, what they would be is they would get sent back to Irwin, and then the discounters like Kmart, Wilco, they would buy these up and they would put price tags on them and sell them individually. Also, some of these old ones would be sitting in inventory for a while. So when I think the general beers, you see a lot of those. If there are any transition types, you see them a lot on the General Beers ones. That one came out in 81 originally in the Sears pack. So by early 83, those were still either the ones that were unsold that year had gone back in inventory, and then they used the stickers to add them on in early 83, sent them back out to like Wilco and places like that, the discounters that would.
So what sort of stickers appear on them?
The transition
It's
stickers?
transition.
it's
So
a
what's on the
transition.
back of it that's what's actually on the back of a transition as well. We only showed the front.
Oh,
but
so
on
it's
the back,
the Akbar offer,
the Akbar
kind of
offer is
half
on
of the
back
bottom
exactly.
sticker.
You'll see that on a couple of these too.
What's kind of neat about the Han too is there's a kind of a minor variation on that where he's been attached on to a Dengar card, and there's a white label sticker that says his name, but you can see through the sticker, you can see Dengar on it. So a lot of people ask, like, well, why did they do that? There was a theory, can't prove it, but there was a theory that if you look at the sets, the Han one, it was felt that one was the highest seller, because if you look at it, of the 7, 5 of them were like brand new Empire Strikes Back figures that year. And then the 2 remaining ones were Han and Chewbacca. So they're perfect for like the Falcon and stuff like that. Eh? So it's believed that they got really, snapped up really quick. Whereas the Dengar one, he only had one new figure for the year, which other than the Dengar figure, but it was FX7. I mean, like FX7,
Right.
who really cares about that? All the other droids in that set were all like from 78, 79. So that one was a bit of a poorer seller.
Yeah.
So in order to kind of put out more of the Han sets, they put Han on both the Dengar and the Han thing. Didn't put Dengar in, and they just kept churning them out to make more and more and more available. And it's odd because I think there's a couple of sets that are out that were sold recently that were the Han sets. So we could tell that may have been more readily available, but still more popular than the other ones were.
So Dengar really never got any love.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Bruce ever surface?
Proof cards. Yeah, there have been proof cards.
Wasn't there like 3 or 4 that showed up, or were they just unused card backs about 25 years
Jordan's,
ago? Yeah, with
one,
like
yeah.
a Han.
I think they were just uncut, like they're rectangular, right? They weren't rounded on the edges, I don't think.
I can't remember. But
Or
I
maybe they
remember-
were.
I think
but-
they were just rounded, like a sample card.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
an American sample card, but
Yeah, I don't
whether
think
they
they
were
were just
proof or
used.
just,
Annie, do you have a question?
I'm interested to hear a little bit more about the German logo controversy. It's a controversy because it was only used for the Star Wars cards that got dropped for Empire Strikes Back?
Well, the controversy is in part because there are Star Wars cards, so this card front without the French logo on the bottom. And so it's always been kind of which ones came out first. And if the regular ones without the pyramid logo came out first, why did they decide to go to these? And if not, why did they decide to take it off? And so it's mostly around that.
Yeah, because
I thought this is
Sure.
the language laws in Quebec changed in '77.
Right.
yep.
That it's mandatory to have the French language bigger than the English. So I wonder if they had produced some of them and then the language laws came into force and they said, okay, we're going to slap some Galles Étoiles on this.
Yeah, no, for
Yeah.
sure. For
Because
sure.
I think afterwards in '79, it was English on the front and French on the back. So that's the way I think they solved the problem. But that's
Well, all those language laws, as you say, were new as well, too. So the interpretation, because we've also heard that, for instance, a trademark term doesn't need to be in French and English if it's a trademark, a name of a movie or something like that. So, yeah, we wondered, could it be that they were trying to follow the language laws and then they were like, oh, we don't have to do this, so therefore we'll drop it. And it's funny because nowadays they're kind of beloved and like, a lot of us Canadian collectors really want them. But I think back in the day when you compare them to the very, not simplistic, but, very clean Star Wars card, there weren't any offer bubbles or anything like that. It looks like so different from those regular ones. And maybe that's part of the reason why we love them so much now, because it is different.
the collectors from France and Belgium, a lot of the French-speaking countries, they go after these things too. So
Yeah. Well, I was noticing last night as we were talking about it too, it's interesting. Like, so Meccano started with the pyramid logo on this size card, but then when they went to the square card, they changed to kind of the spelled out Galles des
Right,
Étoiles,
exactly.
logo.
What ended up being
So
on
they
the back.
actually switched away from that logo
Yeah.
as well. So it's, I'd be interested too. We'll ask some of the Irwin people if they actually remember, but like, where did this logo come from and whether, did Lucasfilm create the logo in other languages and provide it to those countries? Or did someone in France come up with this? Or did we come up with this? Or, yeah, lots of questions. All right. Any more questions? Yeah.
So was it across Canada, that pyramid logo, or was it regional?
So was it across Canada, the pyramid logo, or a regional thing?
it
I
was
think-
national.
Yeah, I think it was pretty national. You see them show up. Yeah.
Do they sometimes pop up perhaps in, say, Quebec, though, more so than, say, BC?
I mean, I've found them in Ontario and stuff before. I don't know if they're more ubiquitous in Quebec than they are in the rest of the country. It'd be interesting to talk to a Quebec collector about that, who's finding stuff in the wild and are they showing up?
Right.
When the G.I. Joe collecting around,
Yep.
like I'm talking about 64 or 76, a lot of the stuff I had were released in Canada, it was regional. So I'll find a lot of French-only packaging in Quebec.
Oh, okay.
That's why I had that question.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's fun to think about these things, and we'll talk with George and Brenda next, and put them in the unfortunate position of trying to answer for decisions they made 40 odd years ago, like on a rainy Tuesday right before lunch or something, and the consequences of it. So yeah, we're gonna set up Jim with a table to autograph and sell the book, and thanks a lot, guys.